When my daughter Claire came over that Sunday afternoon, something felt wrong before she even opened her mouth. She didn't hug me. That was the first sign. For 38 years, she had walked into this house and wrapped her arms around me before saying a single word. Even as an adult, even as a busy mother of two, she still leaned into me like she used to when she was small. But not that day. That day, she stepped inside slowly and looked around, not lovingly, carefully. Her eyes moved across the living room walls, over the fireplace her father had built brick by brick during one impossibly hot summer. They traveled up the staircase he insisted on sanding himself, because he said, "If I'm going to climb these steps every day, I want to know I built them." She wasn't remembering. She was measuring. I felt it in my bones. I offered her tea. Chamomile. 2 sugars. She nodded absently and sat on the edge of the couch, her back straight, her purse clutched in both hands like she was preparing for a business meeting. "Mom," she began, voice tight but rehearsed. "We need your house for the children." For a second, I genuinely thought she was joking. I even gave a soft laugh. But she didn't smile. "Our apartment is too small," she continued quickly. "The kids are sharing a room. They don't have a yard. The schools in this district are so much better." And honestly, she hesitated just long enough to make it hurt more. "This house is too big for you now. Too big." The words didn't just land. They echoed. This house wasn't big. It was layered. Layered with 32 years of marriage. With Christmas mornings where wrapping paper covered every inch of this same floor. With birthday cakes baked in that kitchen. With the night I sat beside my husband in our bedroom, holding his hand while the machines went quiet. Too big. She spoke about square footage. I heard history. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm comfortable here. But you don't need all this space," she replied gently, the way people do when they think they're being kind. "You could move into something smaller. A condo. Maybe one of those nice retirement communities. You wouldn't have to maintain the yard. It just makes sense." Makes sense. Practical. Logical. Efficient. Her words were neat, organized. Like a spreadsheet. But love isn't organized. It spills into corners and soaks into walls. That night, after she left, the house felt different. Not empty. Inspected. I walked slowly through every room. I ran my fingers along the kitchen counter where she used to sit doing homework, her legs swinging because they didn't reach the floor. I opened the hallway closet and found her old roller skates buried behind winter coats. I stepped into the backyard and stood beneath the oak tree where her father had hung a tire swing the summer she turned 8. The bark was rough under my palm. Was I really just occupying space now? Had I become the unnecessary piece of furniture in my own life? The following week she came back, this time with glossy brochures. Photos of smiling gray-haired couples playing cards in spotless common rooms. Swimming pools. Emergency call buttons. She had already spoken to a real estate agent. Already discussed renovation ideas. She was talking about knocking down the wall between the kitchen and dining room. About turning my sewing room into a nursery. She had redesigned my life without asking whether I wanted it redesigned. And that's when something inside me changed. Not anger. Not resentment. Clarity. I realized she wasn't asking for help. She was reallocating resources. And I was the resource. I looked around the living room one more time while she excitedly described paint colors and school zoning advantages. Suddenly, the ache in my chest quieted. I felt calm. Strangely calm. I turned to her and smiled softly. "You're right," I said. "It's too big for me." Her entire body relaxed. Relief washed over her face. She stood and hugged me quickly, efficiently, like a deal had just been finalized. She thought I had surrendered. She thought this was victory. What she didn't understand was that my agreement was not submission. It was decision. If I was going to leave this house, It would not be because I was pushed. It would be because I chose to walk. And when I walked, I would not be stepping aside. I would be stepping forward. The morning after I told Claire she was right, I woke before dawn. For years I had woken up because someone needed something. A husband rushing to work, a child late for school, a phone call, a responsibility waiting in the kitchen sink. But this time, I woke because my mind was clear. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt observant, as if it knew a decision had been made. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sunlight slowly stretch across the hardwood floor. The same floor Claire had learned to crawl on. The same floor her father had refinished twice because he refused to let it lose its shine. Too big. I let the words sit in my mind again. Not painfully this time. Objectively. If it was too big for me, then it was too big for expectations too. I picked up the phone and called a realtor, not the one Claire recommended. A different one. Professional. Direct. "I'd like to list my home," I said calmly. "At full market value." There was a pause. "Are you sure you don't want to sell privately?" "I'm sure. If I was leaving, it would be done properly. No emotional bargaining. No family discounts disguised as love." The house went on the market that week. When Claire found out, she didn't call. She showed up. Her car door slammed harder than necessary, and she walked in without knocking like she used to as a teenager. Her face was flushed, her voice sharp. "Mom, what are you doing?" she demanded. "We were going to move in." "No." I corrected gently. "You were going to take over." Her expression hardened. "That's not fair. We're family." "Yes," I said softly. "We are. And families help each other." "They do," I agreed. "But help is something you ask for, not something you assume." The room felt smaller than usual, as if tension had compressed the air. "You're being selfish," she said finally. "After everything we've been through, after Dad." I raised my hand slightly, not to silence her, but to steady myself. "For most of my life," I said carefully, "I have given without question. And I don't regret it. But this house is not a spare bedroom. It is my home." Her eyes filled with frustration, maybe even betrayal. But beneath it, I saw something else. Shock. She had never seen me draw a line before. The listing attracted attention immediately. Young couples. Growing families. Investors. The realtor told me the house was desirable. Good location. Strong structure. Mature trees. Mature trees. I looked out at the oak in the backyard and felt a strange peace. Whatever happened next, it would not be because I was pressured. It would be because I chose it. Within 3 weeks, we received an offer above asking price. A young couple with a toddler. They loved the garden. They loved the character of the house. They loved that it felt warm. Warm. That word mattered more to me than the price. I accepted. When Claire realized the sale was final, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, stunned way. "I thought you were doing this for us," she said. "I am," I replied. She didn't understand. Not yet. The closing day came quickly. I signed papers in a quiet office while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. It felt surreal to reduce decades of life to signatures and initials. When I walked out, I wasn't homeless. I was untethered. But I had not told Claire the full truth. I wasn't moving into a condo nearby. I wasn't downsizing in the same city. I had already secured a small rental cottage in a coastal town 900 miles away. Somewhere warm, somewhere new. Somewhere no one knew me as spare space waiting to be reassigned. The night before I left, the house was empty. No furniture, no curtains, just echoes. I stood in the center of the living room and closed my eyes. I expected grief. Instead, I felt gratitude. For the years, for the love, for the memories that did not belong to walls, but to me. I walked through each room one final time, touched the staircase railing, pressed my palm against the kitchen counter. Then I stepped outside, locked the door, and slipped the key through the mail slot. Not because I was forced out, but because I was walking towards something. For the first time in decades, I did not know exactly what came next. And instead of frightening me, it felt like freedom. The drive to the coast took nearly 2 days. I expected the long highway stretches to feel lonely, but instead they felt cleansing. Mile after mile, the past seemed to loosen its grip. The city skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror. Familiar streets turned into unfamiliar exits. Somewhere between state lines, I realized I wasn't running away. I was expanding. When I finally arrived in the small coastal town, the air felt different the moment I stepped out of the car. It carried salt and something softer. Possibility, maybe. The streets were narrow, lined with white houses trimmed in pale blues and faded greens. Wind chimes sang lazily from porches. No one rushed. The cottage I rented was modest. 1 bedroom. A small kitchen. A porch just wide enough for 2 chairs and a tiny table. It wasn't grand, but it was bright. Sunlight poured through wide windows, and if I leaned slightly to the left on the porch, I could see a thin strip of ocean between the neighboring rooftops. The first night, I slept deeply. No creaking house full of echoes, no phone calls, no weight of expectation pressing against the walls. Just quiet. The next morning, I woke to the sound of waves. Real waves. Not traffic. Not sirens, not distant construction. I made coffee and stepped outside barefoot. The wooden porch was cool beneath my feet. The sky was painted in soft pink and gold, the horizon glowing like it was being gently lit from underneath. For the first time in years, I watched a sunrise without checking the clock. Days began to take on a rhythm. Morning walks along the shoreline. The sand firm and cool before the heat of afternoon set in. I started recognizing faces. The man who jogged with his dog. The elderly couple who walked hand in hand every morning. The young mother pushing a stroller with quiet determination. No one knew my history here. I wasn't Claire's mom. I wasn't the widow. I wasn't the owner of a large family house. I was simply Margaret. And that felt surprisingly light. A week after arriving, I wandered into the local library. It was small, but welcoming. The scent of paper and polished wood wrapped around me like something familiar. A flyer near the front desk announced a weekly book club. I almost didn't sign up. For years, my social life had revolved around obligation, school meetings, family gatherings, holiday hosting. I wasn't sure how to join something just because I wanted to, but I wrote my name down anyway. That small act felt bigger than it should have. The book club met on Thursday evenings. 8 women and 1 man gathered around a long wooden table. They laughed easily. They debated plots and characters passionately. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from unfamiliar freedom. No one interrupted. No one redirected. They listened. After the meeting, one of the women invited me for coffee the next day. Not because she needed anything. Because she enjoyed my company. That realization settled warmly in my chest. I began volunteering twice a week at the library, helping children with reading. Sitting beside them as they stumbled over words reminded me of Claire at that age, frustrated but determined. But here, there was no pressure tied to it, no future expectation attached, just presence. Claire called occasionally. The first few conversations were polite but guarded. "How's the place?" she would ask. "It's peaceful," I would reply. She never asked if I was happy. Perhaps she wasn't ready to hear that I was. Then one evening, my phone rang and it wasn't Claire. It was my grandson. "Grandma," he whispered, as if he were calling from a secret place. "Mom doesn't know I'm using her phone." I smiled instantly. "Well, then this must be important." "I miss you," he said simply. The words pierced deeper than anything else had. I miss you too, sweetheart, I replied, blinking back tears. We talked about his school, about a science project, about a soccer game he almost won. After we hung up, I sat quietly on the porch, listening to the waves roll in and out. Distance had changed my relationship with my daughter, but it had not changed my love. The next day, I bought a stack of postcards from a small shop near the pier. Lighthouses, seagulls, sunset skies streaked with orange. Every week after that, I mailed him one. I told him about the dolphins I saw in the distance, about the way the ocean changes color depending on the time of day, about how brave he was for trying new things. I wasn't trying to remind Claire of my existence. I was reminding myself that love does not require proximity to survive. One afternoon, as I walked along the shoreline, I caught my reflection in a shop window. For a moment, I barely recognized the woman looking back. She stood straighter. She walked slower. She looked lighter. I had left a house behind, but I had found something else. Space. Not the kind measured in square feet, the kind measured in breath. It was nearly midnight when Claire called. I knew something was wrong the moment I heard her breathing. It wasn't steady. It wasn't controlled. It was the kind of breathing that comes after holding yourself together for too long. "Mom?" she said softly. "I'm here." For a few seconds, she didn't speak. I could hear movement in the background, maybe pacing, maybe a door closing quietly so she wouldn't wake the children. "They cut down the oak tree," she finally whispered. I closed my eyes. The oak tree. The one her father planted the year we moved into that house. The one he measured every summer, joking that it grew faster than Claire did. The one that held the tire swing. "They said the roots were too close to the foundation," she continued. "It was easier to remove it. Easier." The word felt familiar. "I didn't think it would matter," she admitted. "But when I drove by and saw it gone, it felt wrong. I imagined the backyard without that tree, the open sky where shade used to fall, the empty patch of earth where decades of growth had stood quietly. Change is easier when you don't understand what you're removing. The renovations are beautiful," she went on quickly, almost defensively. "They modernized everything. Open concept kitchen, white cabinets. It looks like something from a magazine." But her voice trembled. "It doesn't feel like home," she said. There it was. The truth she hadn't wanted to admit. "How are the kids?" I asked gently. She exhaled slowly. "They're struggling. The new school is bigger, harder. Tom's commute is longer than we expected. He's exhausted all the time. And you?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I thought the house would fix everything," she whispered. That sentence carried more weight than she realized. She had believed that walls could stabilize what was shaky. That location could repair stress. That square footage could create security. But houses hold memories. They don't manufacture peace. "I thought if we just had more space, things would calm down," she continued. I thought we needed what you had." I let her words settle before responding. "Claire," I said quietly, "what you needed wasn't my house." She didn't argue. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. "My job was to raise you," I continued softly, "to teach you how to build your own foundation, not to give you mine." Silence filled the line again, but it was different this time. Not defensive, not tense, reflective. "I didn't mean to make you feel unwanted," she said finally. I swallowed gently. "I know. And I didn't think about what it meant for you. I just saw a solution." I looked out at the ocean through my window. The moonlight shimmered across the surface, restless but steady. "You weren't trying to hurt me," I said. "But you were trying to rearrange my life without asking if I wanted it rearranged." Her breathing steadied. "I guess I've always assumed you'd just adjust." She wasn't wrong. I had adjusted my entire life. To schedules, to moods, to needs. It had become so natural that even she expected it. I love you, she said quietly. I love you too, I replied. And for the first time since I left, the words felt balanced. After that call, something shifted between us. She began asking different questions. Not when are you coming back, but how are you doing? Not do you miss the house, but are you happy there? The first time she asked that last question, I hesitated. Yes, I answered honestly. There was no accusation in her silence this time, only acceptance. Weeks later, she called again, not crying, not frustrated, just talking, about the kids adjusting slowly, about planting a new tree in their own yard, not to replace the oak, but to start something that belonged to them. I guess we have to build our own roots, she said thoughtfully. I smiled at that. Yes, I replied. You do. That night, after we hung up, I sat on my porch listening to the waves crash gently against the shore. I realized something important. Selling the house had not broken my family. It had clarified it. Love that depends on possession is fragile. Love that survives boundaries is stronger. Claire had needed to struggle a little, and I had needed to stop rescuing, not because I loved her less, but because I respected both of us more. The ocean rolled in and out, steady and patient. Some things must be released so that something healthier can grow. And sometimes, letting go of a house is how you rebuild a relationship. A year passed before Claire came to visit. Not because she refused. Not because I insisted. But because time was needed. Time for resentment to soften. Time for reality to settle. Time for both of us to understand what had actually happened. When she finally told me she was bringing the children to see the ocean, her voice sounded different. Lighter. Not defensive. Not cautious. Just open. I stood on the porch the morning they arrived, watching their car turn slowly down the narrow street. My heart beat faster than I expected. For all my strength, for all my decisions, I was still a mother. The car stopped, and before Claire could even open her door, the children burst out. Grandma. Their voices filled the quiet coastal air like music. They ran toward me without hesitation, without confusion, without judgment. I knelt down and wrapped my arms around them, breathing them in like oxygen I hadn't realized I needed. You really live by the ocean? My grandson asked, wide-eyed. I do. I smiled. Wait until you see it up close. Claire stepped out of the car more slowly. For a brief moment, we just looked at each other. There was no anger left in her face. Only understanding. The cottage felt small once everyone was inside, but it didn't feel cramped. It felt alive. Backpacks landed on chairs, shoes piled by the door. Laughter echoed through the narrow hallway. In the afternoon, we walked down to the beach. The children ran ahead, chasing waves that chased them back. Their laughter carried over the water, bright and unfiltered. They didn't care about property. Or square footage. Or decisions made a year ago. They cared about sand between their toes and the thrill of cold water against their ankles. Claire and I stood side by side, watching them. I was so angry at you, she said quietly. I know. I thought you were abandoning us. I thought you cared more about a house than about your grandchildren. I didn't interrupt. I let her say it. But I see it differently now, she continued. You weren't choosing a house over us. You were choosing yourself. The wind lifted her hair slightly as she spoke. I didn't understand that you could love us and still leave. I looked out at the horizon where the sky met the sea. I never left you, I said gently. I left a house, she nodded slowly. I think I needed you to not fix it for me, she admitted. When things didn't work out the way I imagined, I had to face that. I had to figure out my own solutions. And you did, I said. She smiled faintly. We're learning. We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. I planted a new tree in our yard, she added. It's small, not even close to what the oak was. But it's ours. That meant more to me than she realized. Not a replacement. A beginning. As the sun began to set, the sky shifted into shades of orange, pink, and deep violet. The children finally grew tired and collapsed in the sand, still giggling. "Grandma lives where the sun goes to sleep," my granddaughter declared. I laughed softly. Claire looked at me again, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Are you happy here?" she asked. This time I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I answered. And there was no tension in her reaction. No guilt. No resistance. Just acceptance. On their last evening, we sat together on my small porch. The children were inside, already half asleep from a day of running through waves. "I'm proud of you," Claire said suddenly. "For what?" "For not disappearing." The words settled deep in my chest. For years, I had confused love with erasure. I believed being a good mother meant shrinking when necessary, adjusting endlessly, making space for everyone else until I barely occupied any of my own. But love doesn't require disappearance. It requires presence. Healthy presence. Selling the house had not destroyed my role as a mother. It had restored my identity as a woman. The next morning, when they packed the car, the goodbye felt different from the first one a year ago. It wasn't heavy with accusation. It wasn't strained with misunderstanding. It was warm. "Come visit again soon," I said. "We will," Claire replied. And I believed her. As their car disappeared down the street, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt steady. I walked back down to the beach alone that evening. The tide rolled in slowly, confidently, never apologizing for its movement. I realized something simple but powerful. Children grow up. Houses change owners. Trees are cut down. But dignity, once reclaimed, remains. Sometimes, the bravest thing a mother can do is not give everything away. Sometimes, the bravest thing she can do is stay whole. And in staying whole, she teaches her children how to build something strong of their own.